Oh no, there's even an
mean,
easier one. The equal protection, a Supreme Court case that requiring people to buy an expensive gun safe or whatever to exercise their constitutional right to bear arms violates the equal protection clause. I could see that argument being made. I'm not saying I agree with that. I'm just saying that that's how that would
thing
work.
that's fascinating in an absolute evil way is how somehow we have evolved that the only amendment of the Constitution that is not allowed to have any restraint built into it is the Second Amendment. We have, throughout our history, played with the First Amendment, the rights to free speech in particular, trying to delineate where those boundaries of free speech are. And we've come to conclusions such as you can't willfully start a riot and call that free speech. That's the so-called shouting fire in a crowded theater argument. And we constantly are pushing back and forth on what constitutes free speech, and there's court cases all the time about that. The same thing for the Fourth and Fifth Amendment, particularly in the days now of when we find out what the NSA and the government have been doing. The point is that we are willing to put all of those key amendments to the test of the court, and we are always willing to kind of experiment with pushing them one way or the other. But with the evil genius of the NRA, and I got to hand it to them, they have created a situation where any attempt to even examine some type of boundaries of the Second Amendment calls up this groundswell of psychotic people. You know, Obama's going to take away our guns, and you know, the Republicans have managed to twist what should be a legal constitutional question. I mean, this should be being debated in front of the Supreme Court, not on Fox News. They've managed to take this and wrap themselves in it as a red, white, and blue issue, and say as soon as a Democrat uses the word gun, please everyone overreact, panic, and send donations to us and the NRA. It's an incredible situation that we found ourselves in, and again, it's limited to the Second Amendment.
Mm-hmm. Josh, what does it take?
Well, you're right.
The power of the NRA when you have 90% of people support what Obama did, even more than 80% of Republicans and more than 80% of gun owners, and yet forget just gun nuts. You had the Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, come out immediately after the speech and say this will not stand. I
think what it shows is not so much some sort of insidious power of the NRA, but just how crucial it is for a special interest group to be so singularly focused. I mean, when you look at, say, the labor movement or even energy special interests, there's all sorts of different areas that they're interested in or commenting on. But when it comes to gun control, the NRA is so laser focused and is able to fire up the passions of their supporters in a way unlike any other special interest, that it becomes this sort of unstoppable wave of anti-gun pushback, and while that is terrible, and there is no other sort of issue where that kind of response happens, I do kind of want to push back against what Peter said about the Second Amendment, because of course there's just as many limitations on that as free speech, and Fourth Amendment is basically gone. That is one I do wish we talked about more.
Wait, what are some of the Second Amendment restraints?
Just, the fact that background checks exist at all, the fact that, prisoners can, convicts lose the right to bear arms. I mean, it's the restrictions that are few and far between that are there are done through due process. It's about getting due process. It's why, for example, the not letting the people on the terrorist watch list buy guns is a bad precedent, legally speaking, rather than practically speaking, in that, maybe they shouldn't have guns. Because, again, it's denying constitutional rights without due process, which is exactly what happens in the Fourth Amendment. There are more restraints
to get a driver's license than to get a gun. I mean, I don't think...
But driving that's not a constitutional right. I mean... and again, in the same poll of people who supported the background checks and mental health, I think somewhere around 70% of gun owners and non-gun owners alike supported licensing for handguns, which, again, pass through Congress, that would be an interesting sort of constitutional question, because then you have to get licensed to free speech. I mean, the Second Amendment is the fucking problem. And if there was a way you could, I don't know, change the Constitution and maybe fix that one up, this might be a whole different discussion. But, you know, there are, well, I'm just saying you could have, you know, passed the 28th Amendment, what are we on now? Repealing the Second Amendment. It's been done before. Amendments get rewritten and reworked. Again, never happened. The NRA would literally take over. Like, that would be it. If they tried to
occupy the United States.
Holy shit, they would. But I think it does raise interesting constitutional questions. I mean, it's easy because the issue itself makes sense. Let's not let bad people have guns, but determining how they're bad, and the fact that it's tied to the Constitution, is why, again, to go back to my former point, it would be nice to have a different perspective, a different political perspective on how you could do responsible gun control, rather than the gun control side and the hell no side.
You know, there was one of the great George Romero zombie movies, Dawn of the Dead, which was filmed at the Monroe Mall in Pittsburgh.
Monroeville Mall.
Monroeville. I actually made a
last mall you could smoke in. It was a big deal.
Where they shot the zombie movie. There's a great scene where the guy's getting his blood pressure checked in some machine, and the zombie tears the arm off, and the arm is left. I actually had a photo of me taken in that machine.
Nice.
But that's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about here is that movie starts off with all these experts on TV sort of arguing point counterpoint about what to do about the zombies, and should we shoot them, or should we try to make peace with them, or this, that, and the other thing, and then of course the zombies come in and shred them, and kind of end the argument. And we're doing it here because we're Latest.com, so fuck you. But I mean, the idea would be that the government shouldn't be sitting around just talking about this. We are facing an epidemic of gun violence and gun deaths in our country. We have a situation literally unique in the world in terms of what's going on with guns. I love the Constitution. I respect the Constitution, but the Constitution was never written as an absolutist document. This has been shown throughout our history. The founders were very clear on this. It was a living document. And so simply to say some line about, raising a well-regulated militia somehow translates into we can't license gun owners, or we can't require people to have safety training before they buy a machine gun. I'm just refusing to accept that. I think that we are at a point where this is essentially a public safety crisis. This is like Ebola running loose. We determined, for example, during the fake Ebola epidemic scare, that the government had some rights to basically hold people against their will to protect the population. If you had Ebola, you could just walk around coughing on people. It was a public health issue. And then we're at that point with guns now. I mean, it's time for it's the Second Amendment stuff to really kind of turn it down a couple of notches. Let's stop killing our children, and let's find a way that we can stop being the exceptional nation in terms of the way guns are handled here, are used here, and essentially are allowed to go anywhere they want, any way they want. We need to do something about it now. And if that means figuring out the right ways to do it, that's a great thing. If it means constantly saying, The Onion did a great piece. There's nothing that can be done about this, says the nation where it's the only nation in the world where it happens. Every time there's another mass killing. I'm surprised we don't have a current mass killing to talk about, but we will. If not this week, we'll have one next week.
Ouch. But it starts with the people that we elect. I mean, we continuously elect these old dinosaur politicians that will not change things because mainly they're responding to lobbyists and their pressure groups. But time and time again, we elect these people. Why?
I think the young libertarians are actually worse than the old guard. But all right, let's move on.
They're on the same. They're on par with that.
I think they're worse. I think people like Joni Ernst and Tom Cotton are worse. But let's talk about what's going on.
The fact is, we elect those people.
Oh, well, we personally don't, but someone in Iowa did, yeah.
Right.
Well, that's the funny thing about Congress. It's got the lowest approval rating of all time, but people still love their congressman.